Okay. Show me.
Hi there guys, welcome back to the Jesc channel. Thank you very much for tuning in. And this here is the RekonFPV or RekonFPV. I'm actually not completely sure. RekonFPV, RekonFPV, whatever you want. It is the Rekon 3 1S FPV quadcopter or drone. Obviously designed and developed by Dave C. And from as far as I can tell, produced by HGLRC. So it's a cooperation, let's say. So again, in this video I'm going to review this quadcopter. I'm going to tell you what I think of it. Is it better than I had expected? Is it worse? Is it worthless? Is it very good? And I'll tell you if it's worth its price. Should you buy it? Who is it for? Is it for beginners or experienced pilots? And I will give you my tune. I've spent a couple of days tuning this quadcopter. Right out of the box it flew, well, it didn't fly all that well. Maybe that's possible. Maybe that's due to the lithium ion cell I used. It's not the recommended lithium ion cell, but it did work out well. It didn't get warm, so it was able to provide enough amps. It might be a little bit heavier than the recommended lithium ion cells. I don't know. Again, I will give you my tune, what worked for me. And maybe if you have this quadcopter and the basic, the stock tune doesn't work for you, my tune will help you. You'll just have to see. Again, if you get this quadcopter and the base tune doesn't work for you, my tune might work out better. Let's get into it. So guys, it came to our friend Dave C in a dream, or should I say nightmare, to build it, and they will come. Build a 1S lithium ion powered quadcopter and make it fly. Yeah, so that's what we have here, a 1S FPV quadcopter, long range, well, quadcopter, and it's a flyable FPV quadcopter. And in all seriousness, I'm sure that it took a lot of tinkering to make this work. Every gram needed to be shaved off, and you gotta see what motors work. One size up and the amp draw would have been too big, one size down and the quadcopter wouldn't lift off. And which propeller and what camera, maybe a camera without a plug, etc, etc. And also the FPV antenna over here, it's a simple dipole. Probably a nicer antenna, was just a little bit heavier, so that's what we ended up with. And kudos to Dave C, it does fly. Right? And in that sense it's a nice proof of concept, if you will. That doesn't make it a viable business proposition, a commercial success, but it does fly, and it's at least a nice, well, a first attempt at this type of quadcopter. And that's how I ordered mine. I did order it myself. I didn't get it sponsored by HGLRC or Dave C or Banggood. I wanted to see how good or bad this actually was. And truth be told, I was expecting it to be pretty bad. I was expecting it to fly, but I was expecting it also to be very underpowered. And I was pleasantly surprised. It flies pretty nicely. It's not a freestyle quadcopter, obviously. It's a cruiser at best. It's a cruiser at best. In fact, let me show you my maiden flight with this quadcopter. It is an FPV flight, as you can see. And yeah, I did have to put in a little bit more throttle to get it off of the ground. But once airborne, it flies like most any other quadcopter. One thing I should mention is that I increased the angle of my FPV camera to make it a little more exciting to fly, right? But that also means that the quadcopter, my quadcopter, eats more amps, right? So my flight times will be a little shorter, and the motors actually didn't get all that warm, and especially after my tune they didn't get warm at all. But you tell me in the comment section below, what does this look like? It looks like a flying quadcopter to me, and it was fun. I enjoy most RCs, to be honest, but it wasn't as bad as I had expected again. This is far more of an actual FPV flight than I was expecting. I was expecting a struggle. So yeah, pretty nice, not bad at all. It is definitely far from perfect. There are wobbles. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see that, but there are wobbles in this flight. But again, it's far better than I was expecting. So that is obviously a good start for this RekonFPV 3-inch quadcopter. The one is 3-inch RekonFPV. Yeah, the second good thing about this quadcopter was the setup. It needed no work at all. Is that true? Yeah, I changed the OSD as I always do. I entered my flight modes. But the receiver was hooked up. It worked. VTX setup was correct. So basically no setup work at all. You could use the included flight modes, so that way you could bind it to your radio and go off and fly the quadcopter. So that's convenient obviously and a good thing for beginners. However, like I said, is this a quadcopter for beginners or intermediate or experienced pilots? I'd say that this is a quadcopter for experienced pilots because it will not like crashing. You have noticed that these arms are super thin, skinny. They are made out of carbon fiber. I've seen quadcopters like this made out of plastic entirely. A lot of this quadcopter is made out of plastic, but the arms are carbon fiber, even though they are thin. But yeah, these arms won't like crashing. And you could argue, well, it's a light quadcopter. Not when you add a battery like this, right? So this is not a quadcopter made for people that still often crash. So that in itself makes it not a quadcopter for beginners. If you want a low-powered quadcopter, there are other ones. Quadcopters that fly on lithium polymer Lipo batteries. Those will generally be a better option, I'd say. Then the build quality of this quadcopter. That is actually a hard thing to comment about because this quadcopter is engineered to be super duper light and therefore corners are cut. Again, the arms are skinny and the bottom part of this quadcopter here is a TPU print, is all plastic. And well, it fits together pretty okay. You can even get to the USB connector at the bottom. But if you want to work on this quadcopter, that is a bit of a struggle. Once you take out, let me see, 8 screws from the bottom over here. The wires come out easily, but then when you try to stuff everything back into the frame, that's a little bit hard. So yeah, but that's a consequence of this quadcopter being as light and small as possible. I'd say that it's well engineered and for what it is, it's well built. Then the price of this quadcopter. I'd say that I personally paid too much for this quadcopter. I wanted to try it, right? I wanted to do a review of it, but I paid approximately 170 euros and that's including the receiver, right? Crossfire receiver. That's the only one that was in stock at the moment I ordered it. But 170 euros it is a little bit steep for what you get, for the experience you get. You do pay a little bit extra to, well, support the effort, I'd say, and that's part of the reason that I bought it for, to support this kind of effort, this kind of engineering. That's worth something to me. Maybe that's something worth to you as well, and that might be a good reason to order this quadcopter. But still, 170 euros for this quadcopter, again, for the experience you end up with, is a hard sell. Yeah, if I wouldn't be doing reviews, I probably would have not ordered this one. Simply again because I have a lot of quadcopters and most of them, well, all of them, I should say, are more exciting to fly than this quadcopter. Again, it's a nice proof of concept and it's fun to fly something unique, definitely. You have also a pretty long flight time with a convenient battery type. That might be something you're looking for. Maybe these are easier to transport on holiday. That might be a selling point. But other than that, again, it is a little bit expensive. You'll have to be the judge, and by the time you are watching this video it might have come down in price. In fact, I think it has already come down in price a little since I bought it. But yeah, again, by now there are other options in this genre, so that, well, makes the price go down as well. One last thing about the build. This is the only battery I have that actually fits in this quadcopter, by the way. All my other lithium-ion packs were a little bit too big, but those aren't official 18650 packs either. Those are, well, a little bit longer. Okay, so, but this one should fit. This is an actual 18650. It is very hard to get into the quadcopter, which might be a nice thing. You will definitely not lose it in flight or in a crash. But if I were to press this battery into the quadcopter now, I'd be struggling for at least half an hour to get it back out again. And this is how I flew my quadcopter, with a plastic strap handle around the battery. So I'm going to put it out from that. This is simple tape. So that might be a tip for you. This is obviously very light, but it serves as a handle to pull the battery out. And yeah, so again, that's a bit of a tip. Speaking of tip, here is my tune, my setup for this quadcopter. Let's have a look at, well, the Betaflight setup and my ESC setup for this quadcopter. Alright, hooking up the quadcopter. There we go. Alright, connect, and first thing of note, I have upgraded the firmware, Betaflight firmware, to 4.2.9, and it is not needed. That didn't bring an improvement. So you can simply leave the quadcopter as is in stock. I'm not sure what the stock Betaflight version was. 4.2 probably. Again, the newer firmware didn't improve the flight performance of this quadcopter. Okay, ports, this is as is. UART1 is a MSP, that's probably for Bluetooth. If you want to change settings of this quadcopter via Bluetooth with your phone. Then UART2 is for the serial RX, the receiver. In my case, a crossfire receiver. And then soft serial 1, yes, this quadcopter does need soft serial, regrettably, and that's for the VTX. Let's see, Tramp Smart Audio. So that's your port setup, and that was already set up as is. Configuration, let me see. Yeah, I have downgraded the pit loop frequency. It didn't change anything. I got the impression that the lower pit frequency left the flight controller a little cooler. In some instances the flight controller seemed a little bit warm, and again, I think the stock was 4 kHz, and it didn't matter 2 or 4, the flight performance was the same. And let me see, yeah, I have increased the motor idle. It was set to 5.5 over here, and I set it to 7. That does improve the flight performance a little bit at lower throttle. So that was a change I made. And okay, so my receiver type was already set, soft serial was already engaged, and yeah, I have probably engaged the air mode. The permanent air mode, maybe that was tied to a switch, I'm not completely sure. Either way, it doesn't really matter, of course. If you want to fly your quadcopter without air mode, you'll have to set it up on a switch, of course. And that's everything for our configuration. Power, I have not changed. Obviously, the power levels need to be dropped, otherwise the quadcopter will constantly nag you about the low voltage of the lithium-ion cell. Then PID, and yeah, this is very, very different. Which is a little bit strange actually. The quadcopter did come with a tune. It definitely did not come with stock Betaflight. The stock Betaflight tune is completely different. But I had to tweak, at least for the lithium-ion cell I used, which is not the recommended Sony lithium-ion cell. Again, I had to change my PRD tune quite a lot. You could see the dribble in the flight performance in the flight video. And I'll show you what it's like now with this tune. So yeah, I will zoom in a little to the PRD tune here. And that's the only thing on this page I changed. Nothing on the right side of this screen. Only the PRD values have changed, and again quite significantly. And to that I should add that I think that the biggest difference was the D-min, the fourth column in this screen. I think that the D value dropped too low in normal level flight when you are simply cruising, which is what you mostly do with this quadcopter, right? So I think again that the D-min dropped too low and that made the quadcopter dribble. Okay, so again, this is my tune, and okay, the rates is personal, of course. I've increased the rates, but especially some expo will benefit this quadcopter. And filter settings, this is stock, yeah, stock. I have played around with the filter settings, but it didn't improve things, so I've left this as is. Both the gyro filter multiplier and the detail filter multiplier were both set to 1, and I've kept those at 1. Now, one other thing I've changed is the ESC firmware. Let me see. This here was the original setup. It's the SG19, and the firmware that was on the ESCs was 16.71. And I'm not sure what kind of firmware that is. Default BLHS, probably? Yeah, probably. So I have changed that to a Jesc Maverick firmware. And it's version 16.80. And that is the only thing I've changed. Again, I've simply upgraded the firmware, or changed the firmware, to the Jesc Maverick firmware version 16.80, but it's the 48 kilohertz version. Yeah, and especially that last thing kept the motors cooler, and it also improved the flight performance of this quadcopter. So I will leave a link to where you can find this firmware in the description down below. There will also be a link to this quadcopter in the description down below, of course. And I'm not saying that you need to buy this quadcopter, but if you want to support my channel, there is an affiliate link in the description down below. So guys, that was my review and tune for this RekonFPV 3-inch 1S lithium-ion flyer. Again, I was pleasantly surprised by its performance. It's better than I was expecting. And also you might have seen other reviews about this quadcopter by now. It's not super duper new. That's a result of me ordering the quadcopter myself, of course. You tell me in the comment section below what you think after this review and the other reviews. If you are considering this quadcopter, I'd say that yeah, it's something different. It's not as bad as you might have expected, probably, but it's no more than a cruiser. You get pretty long flight times. With the increased camera angle I flew the quadcopter with, I got easily 10 minutes, which is nice, obviously. And if flying on a lithium-ion cell is more convenient in any circumstance for you, maybe again on a trip, taking them with you on the airplane, then this might be the quadcopter. The quadcopter itself is pretty easy to transport, it's pretty small. So again, tell me in the comment section below what you were expecting and what you think of the quadcopter. And hopefully my tune helps you out if you are considering it, or maybe if you already have it. For now, I want to thank you for watching. Catch you on the next video. Bye bye.